You wanted elite defensive commits. Here they are. Welcome into the Voice of College Football, talking Buckeyes as we do each and every Wednesday. 11 a.m. Eastern time is our typical start time, but with schedules changing at times, we would encourage you to please subscribe to the channel, hit that bell for the notifications to know when we go live. Steve Hellwagon's here from Bucknuts 247 Sports. Kevin Noon, Buckeye Huddle, the Big Mean Podcast, and College Football Playbook is the venture right here on YouTube. Gentlemen, how we doing today?
Doing great.
Doing well.
Good. Justin Scott, Big Fish. Last I heard, it was between Notre Dame and Michigan. Well, it is no longer between Notre Dame and Michigan. He is an Ohio State Buckeye as of right now. Of course, signing day is coming up in December, and there will continue to be contacts made to Justin Scott, I am sure, over the next few months. But out of St. Ignatius, not in Cleveland, Steve, but out of Chicago as a top 2 or 3 defensive linemen in the country.
Yeah, 6'4", 310-pound defensive tackle, and this is the kind of 5-star defensive tackle that Ohio State has not had in recent years. Number 14 overall prospect in the country, number 3 defensive tackle, and you just watch his tape. I mean, he's nimble. For such a big guy, gets off blocks, wreaks havoc in the backfield. And I think that this caught a lot of people off guard late last week when this happened, Friday or Saturday, I guess, going into the holiday weekend, that Scott made his verbal commitment to Ohio State. And so the Buckeyes fill a glaring hole, glaring need at defensive tackle. They were hoping to also add, Marquise Lightfoot, I think, also from Chicago, defensive end. But at the 11th hour, people were furiously switching their crystal balls and their predictions online from Ohio State to Miami, and that's exactly where he ended up committing. But Justin Scott, the better prospect of the two, or the higher ranked prospect of the two, and again, fills a tremendous need for Ohio State at defensive tackle. So to me, just a huge get for Larry Johnson and Ohio State on the defensive side of the ball. And I know that as we get into this hour, there are many, many more defensive guys lined up waiting, it seems, at least to make commitments, and some of them to make commitments to Ohio State. We can tick some of those off here as we get into this, but Justin Scott, a huge name, I think, for Ohio State to take off the board and to put into this class now. 17 commitments, probably headed in the low 20s before it's all said and done.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think that the number is going to be a little bit higher, actually, Steve. I think we're going to see a class that's going to get at least a 25. I mean, I think it could go a little bit higher. There is a real strong chance that we could see a lot of attrition after this year. You have a gigantic senior class / guys that are in their 4th year type of situation. And if this team is as good as a lot of people think they're going to be, and you mess around and you win it all, a lot of guys could bolt. So I think that they're going to fill the ranks and figure out the numbers later. But as to Justin Scott, Ohio State has done well at times in its defensive tackle recruiting, but that's a lot of 3 techs. Justin Scott's a 1. I mean, he is a big body space eater, kind of in the mold of Caden McDonald. Was drawing a blank there for a second. Justin Scott, definitely the higher rated recruit compared to Caden McDonald, who's a true freshman this year. Of course, it brings in the question, could we see some odd man front in the future for Ohio State? Because they've never really had a lot of those 310 guys up the gut that can just line up over the center. So a lot of interesting things there. But yeah, Michigan and Notre Dame certainly felt as if they were in the catbird seat in this one. Am I shocked Ohio State landed him? Not entirely. I'm surprised. Am I shocked at the timing of it? Absolutely. I mean, we all pre-write stories and have things ready to go when we think somebody is on the verge of committing. And I've written more stories that have not made publication than have made publication in terms of recruiting stories. Didn't have anything ready on Justin Scott. That's how much of a surprise it was to me of when it came down, but just a huge get. The reports of the demise of Larry Johnson's coaching career are greatly overstated at this point, greatly exaggerated. This is a huge get. And as Steve alluded to, there are some other names that are on the horizon right now that are looking very good for Ohio State fans, and this could be a pretty darn special defensive line class for the Buckeyes. After year in and year out of special receiver classes, if you can start getting some of these on the defensive side of the ball, things might even out a little bit.
So, Kevin, why don't we stay right there with some of the probabilities or possibilities with some of these other prospects? Steve had alerted me to some scheduled announcements coming up, whether that's Aaron Scott, KJ Bolden, Kingston Viliamu, Asa.
KVA. Yeah, we'll just call him KVA. That's a lot easier.
You're usually the expert, at least here. You are the expert of a bunch of, low grade.
I'm just the tallest
pronunciation
experts. It doesn't mean that I know anything, but yeah.
Yes, you're on the high end for this show when it comes to figuring out the pronunciation ahead of the rest of us. But where do we stand in regards to what you expect, where the leans are, and what the possibilities are for the Buckeyes?
Well, I don't want to give away all the information quite yet. That you have to have a reason to check out Buckeye Huddle and Bucknuts and sites like that. So can't give it all away. But we know that on the defensive side of the ball, that Miles Lockhart is supposed to announce tomorrow. He's really between Ohio State and Oregon. I mean, there might be some other schools in there, but those are the main two. I expect that one to go Ohio State's way, and then. Yeah, you mentioned Aaron Scott, who's going to be deciding at the end of the month, and that's obviously going to be a big deal. Ohio State, Oregon, and Michigan there. It's his dad's birthday. His family are huge Buckeye fans, so a lot of people have done the math that probably means that is going to be Ohio State. But, to stay on the kind of the theme of the defensive line, I mean, obviously you have Edric Houston, who's supposed to be announcing in August. There are a lot of crystal ball, future casts, RPM, whatever's, tea leaves out there saying that Ohio State seems to be sitting in a good position for him, and I agree with that. You've got Dylan Stewart out of Washington, D.C., who has also recently had some of those prediction pieces come in favor of Ohio State. So, if the Buckeyes are able to land guys like that. But I think another name that people aren't talking about as much as Nigel Smith out of Melissa, Texas, seems to be kind of an Oklahoma lean, I think. But you got to wonder what the movement of Marquise Lightfoot, who Ohio State's going to continue recruiting, because honestly, until about 48 hours, maybe even less before his announcement, I think everybody felt it was going to be Ohio State. So, once things settle down, does he maybe change his mind? You never know. I mean, recruiting is very fluid. But there are a lot of names out there defensively in terms of the line. And then, yes, you've got KVA, the linebacker. I think he's July or August, I think is kind of what he said. That would be a huge get. You sit there and you look at Nicholas Rodriguez, who committed to Missouri, the linebacker out of St. Thomas Aquinas in Fort Lauderdale. His commitment to Missouri really leads me to believe that Ohio State feels pretty strongly about its chances of KVA, because you just don't let a guy like Nick Rodriguez walk. And, I think Nick Rodriguez wanted to go to Ohio State if all things are being equal. He's teammates with Ohio State running back commit Jordan Lyle. So a lot could be happening coming up soon. And I think that the people that were very worried about Ohio State's defensive recruiting lagging so far behind the offensive recruiting, I think by the time we get to September 1, people will still have reasons to be like, well, we're not completely set at safety, or we're not completely set here. But I think the overriding concerns may be tempered a little.
Yeah, KJ Bolden, the big-time safety from Buford, Georgia, ranked number 6 overall nationally. I think he's supposed to announce, I want to say August 5th. Does that sound right? And, most of the future casts and crystal balls are in on Georgia for him. But Bill Kurlick, who I work with, still says he thinks there's an outside chance Ohio State could land KJ Bolden. And he said there's been a campaign by the Ohio State commitments in the class 2024 guys to really campaign and work KJ Bolden behind the scenes to get him to become part of this class. So to me, safety is a position where they're playing some older players right now. And by 2024, there is a chance, kind of a changing of the guard moment there, where he could maybe come in and get some reps and get some plays as a true freshman in 2024 if he's all he's cracked up to be. So I'd say that one is kind of probably a 60-40 Georgia proposition, but Ohio State's going to fight that one tooth and nail. I really don't have a great feeling on Dylan Stewart. I mean, it sounds good in theory that some people are thinking he's leaning Ohio State's way, and I think that would be just a huge get. Edric Houston, another big timer out of Buford, Georgia. Is he leaning to Ohio State? I guess we'll see. We're going to find out soon enough, it seems like. So going to announce in August, it sounds like. So there's a lot out there. There's a lot of meat on the bone, and I think that Ryan Day and Jim Knowles deserve credit for really sinking their teeth into this challenge. I think some of it is that Jim Knowles, now second year, has become more familiar with the players. The players have become more familiar with him. James Laurinaitis is helping him out with linebackers, so that's huge. Larry Johnson, the one holdover, is starting to really take root again and bring in some big-time guys. And I think Tim Walton and Perry Eliano are going to do a bang-up job in the secondary. They're going to get great players, I think, to come in and play at Ohio State. So you increase and improve the and this is something I've harped on for 3-4 years now, you increase and improve the caliber of the X's and O's. It's only going to help the bottom line for the entire defense. And I think that's what we're seeing right before our eyes, one kid at a time.
I want to jump in with my thoughts on KJ Bolden. I've known Bill Kurelic forever. I've worked with him before for 1 year when we were both at Rivals. And I'll say Bill's probably a little bit more conservative in terms of his picks than maybe I am. Maybe I wildcat a little bit more on things. I feel pretty good about Ohio State's chances in landing KJ Bolden, to be quite honest. I would put Ohio State as the favorite. And honestly, I think Alabama might be more in the mix
challenge than Georgia.
And if we're being, if my information is correct there. And one thing too about Buford High School is Buford is a powerhouse outside of Georgia, northeast of Atlanta, out northeast of Atlanta, I guess. That is a school, despite all of UGA's best efforts, that it can't lock down. And it's not Glenville. It's not going to get everybody that comes out of Buford. And that's, strangely enough, where Dylan Raiola has transferred to, the former Ohio State quarterback, current UGA quarterback recruit commit, I guess. So I like Ohio State to go 2 for 2 at Buford in landing both of those guys. So, we'll see. Things change. Again, as I said, Marquise Lightfoot, 36 hours prior to his announcement, I was fully expecting to be Ohio State, and things change. But between Edric Houston and KJ Bolden, I feel stronger about Edric Houston ending up at Ohio State. But as I remember a taco commercial once, the little girl saying, "Why not both?" And I would say that too. Why not both? I think that Ohio State can land both.
Yeah, for a school that lives in the top 5 in recruiting, it's still pretty astonishing what they're accomplishing. And in place of maybe 5 or 6 of the top 8 guys in the class being offensive players, it's becoming a more well-rounded class as they start to continue to drive in these defensive commitments. And as you both stated, if they can get their fair share of this next batch that's coming up, then it really could be impressive. And if we look at the numbers right now, if you look at the recruiting rankings in terms of average player rating, Georgia and Ohio State have separated themselves. Alabama's on the way. Of course, their average player rating's as good as anybody, and they'll add the volume and get there. But those 3 are way out in front of everybody else when it comes to the quality of the classes. It's pretty astonishing, which kind of leads us into this super chat. Ryan, we appreciate you stopping by. Appreciate your contribution. Based on your collective experiences, could this be one of the best classes ever? Best offensive or defensive class?
Well, I've done the piece studying the recruiting site era, which I think I really put back to like 2002, 2003, as people know who've watched the shows through the years. I used to work for Rivals. So that's the service that I would go through. And every year we would get into May, June, July, and I would write the piece. This is the year Ohio State is going to have its highest rated class ever. This is the year that Ohio State is going to get the number one class overall. And then, the wheels fall off a little bit and it finishes 2 or 3 or 5. There's the math is certainly there. And I know each of the networks kind of have a different way they do the formula. I've not studied all of them, but I think if you look at what could happen on the defensive side of the ball, if Houston, if Stewart both come on board, if KVA, if KJ Bolden, Aaron Scott, guys like that get in, and then Ohio State hits 1 or 2 50-50 balls there, then I think that the defensive side could be strong. I mean, could be really strong. And I think the offensive side is already there. But one more thing to remember is that it's a constantly evolving playing field. We don't know what the rankings are going to look like in January. We don't know what the rankings, will the Armstrong twins move up? Will Air Nolan move up? Will somebody move down? There are always going to be people who are skeptical of the powers that be, that they will move rankings. The term Bama bump has been thrown around for many, many, many years. And there are people that are not fans of Ohio State who believe there is a Buckeye bump. As somebody who's covered Ohio State for years, I'm not as sold on that, because there are a lot of times that down the stretch, Ohio State would have 20 commits, and 4 would move up and 4 would stay present, and then 12 would move down. So I'm not necessarily sold on that, but the proof is in the pudding in terms of let's reconvene on Ohio State Buckeyes Live 500 here in a few years, once these guys have had a couple years to play, because that's truly the litmus test. It's not necessarily what Network A or Network B or Network C says. I know that everybody desperately wants to have that recruiting national championship for whatever that is worth, but win some damn games. That's going to be the thing out there. Win some national individual awards. Those are going to be the things that are really going to tell the story along with Natty's.
Yeah, they have commitments from 5 national top 50 players right now. When you're talking about Jeremiah Smith, the wide receiver, just got Justin Scott, the defensive lineman, Mylan Graham, wide receiver, Aaron Noland. I know 24/7 moved him up a little bit. He is now 34 in the composite, and he is considered a 5-star. So he's kind of moved from 4 to 5-star. When you have a 5-star quarterback, that kind of raises some eyebrows sometimes as well. Just that kind of standard bearer for your class and your offense. That really helps your offensive class ranking if you broke it into the 2 units. And Bryce West is the 5th one, the cornerback from Cleveland Glenville. Interestingly, 24/7 Sports, our network, has him somewhere in the mid 100s as a network, and everybody else seemingly has him in the top 30 because his composite comes out at 45. So, and I've taken some questions on that. I need to ask Alan True and Steve Wiltfong and the other folks. I think Andrew Ivins, may be one of the ranking people in charge at 24/7, like what gives on Bryce West. And my guess is the answer is going to be a twofold thing. It's going to be don't really like the competition that he plays against in the regular season. A lot of Cleveland public schools aren't very good, although they did run through everybody in Division II to win the state championship last year, for whatever that's worth. And the other thing is, I don't know that Bryce West probably got out to all the Nike, Under Armour, Rivals, 24/7, whoever has a camp and a combine. I don't know that he hit all of those. And, that's one area where they meet you, they look at you, they compare you, they time you, they weigh you. and they rank you. So if 24/7, for whatever reason, the one outlier on this never got proper data on him or never saw him somewhere in a camp, then they're downrating him because of that. So I don't know. Kevin, do you have a thought on why? You have nothing to do with this, but why is 24/7 downrating our boy here?
I don't know. I'm not going to put this on 24/7 because I talk to a lot of people, and I don't. In order to protect sources, sometimes you purposely don't remember who tells you certain things, so you don't slip. But I've been to some events and talked to some people or whatever. I think there's some technique concerns there. He's very, very handsy, very grabby. Those are things that can be coached out of him. But I think that there's a belief that while he has all this athleticism and he certainly has speed and everything else, the technique is not necessary. I mean, again, we're splitting hairs. If 24/7, I don't have his profile in front of me. If you guys have him in the high hundreds, the 100s, that is, that's still a really damn good player. I mean, no, it's not being a guy being in the top 30 nationally, but I think that there's probably a belief that he has some technique things that he needs to work on. And the good news is there's probably going to be, between all of the networks, 3 or 4 more rounds of updates in terms of rankings. And if he comes out this year for the Tar Blooders and shows that he is putting himself in better positions and not having to grab as much and things like that, I think that he'll rise. But I think every talent evaluator, regardless of what network they're in, has certain things that they look for in certain boxes that need to be checked off. And I've certainly talked to some people who have felt that he's a little handsy.
Yeah, I don't get wrapped up in the rankings. I think if you get great players, great people, and fill your position needs in a given year, then you've accomplished it. And I think Ohio State 9 times out of 10 does that. So I don't worry too much about it. Again, we have all harped on the defense and the lack of star power until they were able to stack in there a Sawyer, a Tuimoloau, a Styles, a Hicks. Those 4 in particular. There's somebody else I'm missing, but those guys in recent years have helped certainly improve the profile, of what the defense looks like. And we'll see this year if Styles and Hicks can get on the field for a lot of plays and show that they can live up to those lofty rankings and make the kind of credit. And I think same with Sawyer and Tuimoloau. I think people are waiting for that all Big Ten, All-American type season from those guys. And we'll see this year if they can deliver on all that promise and what that means on the bottom line, which comes back to winning games. I mean, they had the number 1 recruiting class in 1996 and never won a national championship with any of those players. They had the number 2 recruiting class in 2002. And they did have guys who were contributors on the national championship team that season. Maurice Clarett, certainly in 2002. Bobby Carpenter and A.J. Hawk were backups and really important special teams players, and on down the line. And eventually that class did produce a Heisman Trophy winner with Troy Smith, Santonio Holmes, probably about 8 or 10 guys who played a decade in the National Football League. So that was a class that even with the guys who flamed out, which after his first year, that was Clarett and Derek Morris and Mike DeAndrea and 2 or 3 others, that it was still a productive class. They played for the national championship in the 5th year for many of those players, including Troy Smith in 2006. So there is a correlation. If you, have number 1, number 2, number 3 ranked classes, you can feel pretty good going forward about being in a 12-team playoff field if you can do that over a several-year period. So Ohio State's certainly been the team, the school that's done it, along with Alabama, Georgia to a degree, Clemson as well. So those are the ones that are going to be in the hunt year in and year out.
But, let's look at the class of 2018 as an example. That was the number 2 class in the nation, according to Rivals.com. 3 5-stars. Taraja Mitchell, who, I really like Taraja personally, but he didn't have a huge impact on on the team. Tyreek Johnson, who had zero impact on the team, and then Nick Petit-Frere, who obviously had a good season, is, a good career, has gone on to the NFL. Sadly, got caught up in NFL wagering issues, going to miss 6 games. Then you go to the next cut of guys, the high 4 stars. Brian Snead ended up leaving school under bad circumstances. Jalen Gill transferred out. Teron Vincent didn't necessarily have a huge career. He had his moments, but I wouldn't sit there and say that he was one of Ohio State's best players. Blue Smith, yes, people probably don't remember Blue Smith, the receiver out of Huber Heights. He transferred and disappeared. Antoine Jackson, who probably was a little bit of a step down from Teron Vincent. Tyreek Smith, who, had his moments, and Tyler Friday, who had his moments. But if I go through this 2018 class, the player that was really the most impactful player, day in and day out over the run of his career, was the lowest rated player, tied in there as a 5.7 recruiting ranking, Chris Olave. But, so a lot of times you got to remember that rankings are only as good as the people who put the rankings together and what it is that they see. So that's why I don't allow myself to get too caught up in the rankings, because you just don't know. And I mean, what I should do is I should look at 24/7's rankings for that class. But the reality is a lot of times everybody wants to blaze their own trail and have their own rankings. But I think there is a little bit of inadvertent groupthink that happens there. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's a great example, that 2018 class. That is why don't get so wrapped up in the class rankings. And as I said, just the litmus test to me is, as I said, great players, great people, which I think some of the folks in that one you just ticked off may not tick that box entirely. And then, fill your position needs. So, that was probably the last urban class, and, it was what it was, I guess.
Well, I tend to not get so much wrapped up in the individual rankings, because we can review any class for any school or go to the top 300 players in any year and find busts all over the place, as Kevin just ran down for one particular class. And then we can find obvious 3 stars. I found an interesting list this week released by College Football Report that, not surprisingly, Iowa has produced the most NFL players out of 3 stars in the college football playoff era. But do you know who's number 2 in the Big Ten? Ohio State. And they're signing less 3 stars than anybody, but they're producing the most outside of Iowa, who has, I just looked at one class. I looked at the 23 class and saw that Iowa signed 23 stars and Ohio State signed 1. And they're still producing more 3-stars to the NFL during the college football playoff era than any school in the Big Ten except for 1. That's astounding. So the rate of return on the 3-star development at Ohio State is better than anybody in the Big Ten. And basically, to both of your points, I look at it this way. I don't get wrapped up in the individual rankings, but I think the team rankings from year to year, all you have to do is look at the college football playoff and look at the teams that obviously are at the top of the list. And that doesn't guarantee success. But on the flip side, you cannot have that success on the field without those type of classes. You cannot bring in the 18th rated class in the country over 4 years and compete for a national championship.
Well, and the thing with 3 stars too, especially for like a program like Iowa, and I don't have one of their classes in front of me, but I assume they get some guys out of Iowa. They probably get some guys out of southwestern Minnesota, out of Nebraska,
A lot of Illinois.
Are these guys really rated as 3 stars, or are they assigned as 3 stars? We haven't really Are you going to sit there and watch this guy that has, Iowa, Northern Iowa, and I don't know, Creighton. I don't know if Creighton even has a football team. Offers. Are you going to watch him as much as you're going to watch this 4-star kid or this 5-star kid? Is it a case of, well, he's got Power 5 offers, so he's probably not a 2-star. So let's make him a 3-star. It's like the fallacy of the 0-star. This guy was a 0-star coming out of high school. No, it just means he wasn't rated. It just means that nobody took the time to sit there and give him the default 2 stars or maybe 3 stars or whatever. There's no such thing as a 0 star. There is nobody that is going to a Power 5 school or even a group of 5 school that is a 0 star, that analysts have stared at them and is like, this kid sucks. He's a 0. He's horrible. And then he ends up turning in and being like a first-round NFL draft pick. It is such a dishonest fallacy that there is such a thing as that. So I always kind of take this 2-star, 3-star talk with a little bit of a jaded view, having been around on multiple national signing days, and there are a bunch of kids that you see end up on schools' lists, and it's like, I don't know anything about this kid. Well, give him a couple stars or something like that. So, we'll see. It doesn't necessarily take anything away from the point that Mark made or that, College Football Report made. I think Iowa does a hell of a lot more with less than a lot of programs do, and that Ohio State certainly, James Laurinaitis was a 3-star, and he again, a kid coming out of the state of Minnesota that wasn't probably necessarily looked at as closely by some people, and bully for them. They made something out of it, but at the end of the day, it was the hard work that James put into it.
Just to clarify that list, now that I think about it, those were first round NFL draft selections. Those weren't just NFL players. Those were first round selections from the Big Ten in the playoff era. Ohio State at number 2 in the Big Ten. And again, what's astounding about that is that they signed less 3 stars than anybody. They're producing the second most to the NFL in the first round. And obviously Chris Olave, boom, you guys mentioned his name just a few minutes ago. He'd be the first one that comes to mind for me. Kevin Noon, you can catch him, as he mentioned just a few minutes ago. You get a really good overview of Ohio State football here each week on our Wednesday show, but take a deep dive, be an expert. Check out Kevin's work at BuckeyeHuddle.com, the Big Me podcast. When is the last one that's hit the shelves for the Big Me podcast?
Well, over at Buckeye Huddle, we did a live show on Friday, and we kind of did rock, scissors, papers to see who we were going to, which banner we were going to put it under, and it went under Buckeye Weekly instead of Big Me Kickoff. So I will probably do a show on Friday with the Miles Lockhart decision being tomorrow on Thursday. This 3-day week has me all screwed up on my days. I'll probably do something on Friday, probably a live show, and my live shows, I let the viewers kind of pick the topics we talk about. I prepare very little. So if you don't bring questions, you're going to get to hear about what I cooked for the 4th of July or how the cats in this house are annoying the hell out of me. But you can catch me at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle or all of your favorite podcasting outlets.
We appreciate Steve posting these shows on bucknuts.com. Steve, what do you have working this week?
Again, following a lot of travel basketball stuff and my other beat here covering basketball with the site, but also staying on top of football developments as well. And really, just counting the days down. It'll be just a few weeks till we're off to Indianapolis for the Big Ten meetings, probably 3 weeks, I guess, from now. So, yeah, it's going to be here before we know it. And, all this football recruiting coverage, our guy, Bill Kurlick, he's all over it on our site. And plus Steve Weltfong and everybody else at 24/7 contributing as well. So plenty of coverage about all these breaking stories and guys who are changing their top 5 list and setting their, you got to have a story because someone has set their announcement date and, and feeding all the rabid recruitniks out there. So it is the hot stove league for Ohio State football is alive and well as we wait for them to pass out the helmets and the shoulder pads here in a few weeks.
Folks, we love your comments and questions. We get to as many as possible. Obviously, you move yourself to the head of the line with a super chat. Plus, we appreciate your contribution. It keeps us going here at the Voice of College Football, and in particular, our Buckeye show every Wednesday. As is typical, our guy Yakov goes to yesteryear. Justin Scott, the next Warren Sapp of Miami, of course, and Tampa Bay Buccaneers fame. That would be fine. If that seemed true.
Yeah, I think Ohio State would take that in a heartbeat. But we haven't seen play one of his senior season, let alone, what he's going to look like in college. I mean, Sapp 6'2", 300 pounds or so, just looking at his wiki page quickly. Maybe. I've watched the tape of Justin Scott probably half a dozen times now, and I'm really impressed with what I see there. It's hard to compare a prep player to an NFLer. I mean, I guess I could go to his college tape, but even with that, I mean, we're still talking about young men versus grown ass men in the NFL. So, I mean, that's GROAN in case you are a Kentucky coach. I think people who follow recruiting know what I'm talking about there. So, Yakov, I wish I could give you a better answer, but I am the worst person to deal with comps. I hate doing comps because it's just not fair to anybody.
Yeah, especially not to that degree. We're talking about an all-time great Hall of Famer, but Yakov, we appreciate that, of course, and always love your historical spin on everything. Zach, because we read all these super chat contributions, of course. Here we go. Kevin, where is your residential Irish fan at?
I don't know where Michael Campbell is right now. We don't have a lot of cloverleaf and frowny face and smiley face and laughing face and explosion emojis. I'm watching the chat right now, so I have no idea. Maybe he will join us on Big Me Kickoff on Friday. Maybe he will be on the BM Morning 5. I don't know. I mean, but he pops up everywhere like a bad penny.
Yeah, we've got 140 folks on the line, and he typically makes it to spin his Irish flavor for us, but not today. Not today. Comments and questions coming in. We appreciate all of those. Somebody mentioned that Dan Hawkins. Wow, I haven't heard that name in a long time. Didn't believe in recruiting rankings. I'm guessing that's because he didn't fare well in recruiting rankings, number one. And number two, what did he ever, he had a nice coaching career, but not to the degree that we're talking about.
I just want to answer JW Crunch's question up there about what I cooked for the 4th of July. I did a pork butt for pulled pork. Anybody who follows me on Twitter can see pictures there at Kevin_noon. Didn't really do pictures throughout the entire cook because I started it at like 10 p.m. on the 3rd and served it about 5 o'clock on the 4th.
And there you go. Appreciate y'all being here. Buckeyes Live. We've got an Oklahoma show coming up at 12:30 Eastern. So just a half hour after we're done here, head on over to the Sooners channel that we've got here, the Voice of College Football. We talk Oklahoma football for an hour every Wednesday. We've got Michigan at 5. If you want to go troll, make fun of the Wolverines and their number 4 recruiting class that is falling and is not anywhere close to a player rating close to Ohio State, I can give you plenty of ammunition if you need it for the Michigan fans over there. But that's at 5 o'clock. Florida State at 6. All right. We also added a 3 o'clock Eastern time show this afternoon. We posted a video late last night on the San Diego State debacle with the Mountain West and the Pac-12 kind of looming as part of the dynamic. And we go live because we've got a couple of special guests that really have some insight today at 3 p.m. Eastern time on the main channel. Guys, have any thoughts about all this realignment and who would be headed to the Big Ten? We'll try to keep it close to home, and or who would benefit the Big Ten that's out there. Aside from Notre Dame, they're obviously the obvious choice and just gained their AAU membership here recently.
I don't think anybody would, because to add somebody, they've got to bring value. And that's households for the Big Ten Network and value for the TV partners. And, who's going to turn on television sets to the degree where you now split the pie, an extra cut of the pie, and Ohio State takes less money potentially to add somebody. Ohio State's not going to agree to that. So I don't think you're up to 16 schools and there's only so much TV revenue out there. I don't know who you add other than Notre Dame that means anything at this point.
I'm a big believer of addition by subtraction, and while there were certainly the reports that the Big Ten doesn't want to go out there and be the conference with blood on its hands for the demise of another Power 5 league, if there is a finite pool of television money, as Steve put, which I also agree with, and you completely kneecap another conference, that's more money for you to have. I mean, if we're talking about shares and everything like that, if you go from 5 shares to 4 shares and you come to the top of the heap in terms of those four shares, you're going to get more money. There certainly was a report, somebody tweeting, and the problem is that there are so many people who want to be ahead of this expansion stuff. It's hard to differentiate the noise from actual sourced information. But, you know, Miami of Florida, not Miami of Ohio, Miami of Florida and UNC were certainly mentioned as targets, and that, you know, unnamed source saying that the Big Ten wants to head southeast or whatever, and that Oregon and Washington are all well and good, but this southeast expansion. But again, we know that the grant of rights for the ACC, a lot of people feel it's pretty ironclad and that it doesn't come up until 2035 or something. I mean, we're looking a decade. I don't see this grant of rights lasting that long, whether or not it's a case of ESPN. It's like, well, if we loosen up on this deal or whatever, maybe we can have the right pieces there, or maybe, you know, schools take it to court to challenge it. I've always felt that UNC has been in the eyes of the Big Ten. A lot of that was Jim Delaney, and, you know, Jim Delaney's no longer commissioner, but there is a lot of value there. I think having a team in the state of Florida would be big. I don't know if Miami is necessarily a great fit. I've always felt that UVA could be a team, and I understand that UVA's athletics have been kind of meh recently outside of basketball. And even with that, Tony Bennett has kind of had some up and down moments as head coach of the men's basketball team there. But I'm still going to look out west. I think you have to have dance partners for USC and UCLA. And I think that we're still going to get to the point where the Big Ten and the SEC are going to get to 24. And I think that we're going to get to a point of where you're going to only play teams within your conference. And then you sit there and you have your structure going into your 12 team or whatever, what have you, playoff at that point. And that's where you kind of go out of conference or whatever. I mean, just, you know, take me back to my old days of Major League Baseball, where the NL played the NL and the AL played the AL, and you don't see them again. You don't see them until you get to the postseason.
Well, to Kevin's first point, there are YouTube channels that have sprung up and are thriving just based on talking realignment like every day, and only about 3% of it has any thread of truth to it. We try to go with only when there is breaking news, or if there is some type of statement made by somebody that you can believe, like i.e. a chancellor, a president, a conference commissioner, somebody of that ilk. That doesn't mean it's going to come true, but that means that there is actually something to it. A lot of people talking. Go ahead, Steve.
I think we're seeing it in real time with the Pac-12. The uncertainty of the value of their television contract makes it impossible for them to extend an invitation to San Diego State, because they, you know, if that's what it was or whatever else has happened, I think it's just the uncertainty. And I think this even creeps in for the Big Ten. They've got a contract. USC and UCLA are on their way, and there is some certainty involved with that. But if they went to 17 and 18 teams, how does that impact those contracts and the revenue for all parties concerned? And I think that's uncertain. I think that's ambiguous. I mean, my God, Kevin Warren left so many things up in the air. Do you think that there's a contingency plan in there if they add teams 17 and 18? I tend to think there's probably not. So I think that's part of the issue. The networks are going to say, well, it says here we've got a contract that we get to televise all the games under the Big Ten banner. And if you add 2 more teams, then they're under the banner. And it says right here how much we owe you for it. So, uncertainty, I think, and we're seeing, as I say, in real time, the Pac-12 is paralyzed. They can't do anything until they get that down in writing. And they don't even know who their league's going to be. I mean, they are like being held together by a thread right now. And I think that is what has paralyzed a lot of people in this industry right now. Even back to the ACC is like, man, we'd like to leave. There's got to be greener pastures out there somewhere. Look at all the money these other people are getting. Why can't we have it? Well, because you're not those other people. That's the problem. People don't, Clemson has 80,000 TV homes. So, you don't turn on TVs. So, what can I tell you?
And it's funny too, because we really were in an era where conference expansion was about so much more than just football. I mean, obviously the whole AAU thing and, that membership and research dollars to be part of the Big Ten Alliance, formerly the CIC, is all very important. But, now it's a little bit more of where we're talking about what does it mean for football dollars and everything else. And in the Big Ten deal that Kevin Warren took to the 5-yard line and didn't punch in, there were elevators in there for additional teams. And I think there certainly was one if Notre Dame was an additional team. So there is more money there. But I will say this too. If you go from 16 to, let's just say 20, I think 18 is a really awkward number. So I'm not in favor of that. I think 20 is a better number. Obviously, I think 24 is even better. But if you do that and you give back a couple million a year based on splitting the pie, and honestly, I think there are going to be programs that are going to come in on reduced shares. They're not going to get a full share. USC and UCLA are getting full shares. That is a known fact of this deal. There are reports out there that Oregon and Washington would understand that they might not come in at a full share. I think that, there was a probationary period for Maryland and Rutgers. Even Nebraska came in at a reduced rate at 75 cents on the dollar or whatever it is. I don't know the numbers per se, but the thing is, I think that if you could sit there where the Big Ten was very smart, signing another short deal to get back to the table really before anybody else does, and you give up $6 million a year at this point, and then you have this 20-team league that has a track record and everything else, and you sign your next deal before everybody else, and hopefully the state of advertising dollars and everything else is a little bit better there. And then that's your deal. That's your monster contract at that point where, all right, now everybody on board is getting a full share, and it's not 100 million a school. It's 140, whatever. But I also want to say about the Pac-12, it's funny that everybody believes out there that signing a deal that is in line with the Big 12 is hunky-dory. Well, the Big Ten has this huge deal, and the SEC's deal is nothing to sneeze at too. So if everything else is moving up and you're remaining constant with what you've had before, or what this other guy has, well, you can all be poor together. You're falling behind in the arms race. So I don't know why anybody would necessarily want to sit there and sign on to a deal that is largely going to be non-linear, and you're going to have to be on Apple TV or wherever. I mean, it's such a small part of the Big Ten deal with what's going to be on Peacock or whatever. I don't understand what the end game is for the Pac-12 at this point, and how any of that is necessarily going to make anybody happy. It's just going to devalue the Pac-12 to the point of, if I'm Oregon or Washington or Arizona or Colorado, I want to jump now. I don't let the property values in your neighborhood all go to tank and then try to sell your house. You need to go while the market at least has a little value in it.
I guess it all depends on what you expect and what you want for your conference. And speaking for the Big 12, I think they're just happy that they survived, because they were in a precarious state there. When Oklahoma and Texas jumped, they're sitting with only 8 schools. And then there was a tenuous couple months where if they lose another school or 2, then they're all going to bail and scatter. So they were in that tenuous situation, and they recovered about as well as possible, getting the 4 schools that they did just to secure the league. They're not going to compete with the Big Ten, to your point, Kevin, both monetarily or from a resource standpoint or from a winning standpoint. Most likely, I don't see a school in the conference that can legitimately compete for a national championship going forward or compete with the SEC. They just want to be in existence and get their champion or maybe one other team to a 12-team playoff and make money, play football games with a bunch of 7-5 and 8-4 teams.
I want to jump in on something I'm seeing in the chat too. The question of Rutgers' legitimacy as a Big Ten member. And we can go round and round. It's not a case of how many television sets Rutgers turns on, how many people watch Rutgers. It is a matter of how many households are available that you can charge in footprint carriage rates. It's like 10 cents out of the footprint and like $1.20 inside of the footprint. So there's a lot of money there to be had. And just because Rutgers sucks, I could go through every conference and give you 2 or 3 teams that suck. Do you want to sit there and play a 12-team schedule where all 12 games are losable? I know that would be fun and exciting in the moment. And I know that once we get to a 12-team playoff, one loss is not going to be as crippling. But with that being said, I think that coaches want to sit there and have some times where you're not fretting every second of it. So it doesn't matter if people are watching Rutgers or not watching Rutgers. That has nothing to do with it. It gives you the New York market. It gives you a crap ton of households that you're charging in footprint carriage rates to. And it also helps you with the whole academic side, the research and grant money, when you have DC because of Maryland and you have New York City because of Rutgers. That's all part of the equation as well. And that's why a lot of people, when they're looking toward westward expansion, keep throwing Stanford in there more so than its ties to Notre Dame in terms of their football rivalry. Stanford would be a boon for the Big Ten Alliance.
Really good stuff here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate y'all being here on another Wednesday. It's Buckeyes Live. We're here about 99% of the time on Wednesday, but there is a reason to subscribe and turn on the notifications to know when we go live, because we announce a schedule change as soon as possible. Sometimes we've got to alter the day based on scheduling conflicts. If you are connected to a business or own a business, we can let you know how we can benefit you by sponsoring our show and our channel here. All right, Steve, catch him on Bucknuts 247 Sports. Anything else you want to highlight there, Steve?
Nope. Just as we said, working on some different odds and ends right now, and going to continue to enjoy the heat. It's about 90 degrees here today in Columbus, so drink lots of water and stay in the AC. Or get in the pool, one or the other.
Folks, these guys show up for us each and every week. They've got a zillion things going. They don't need to do this. And maybe I shouldn't say that, because then it'll dawn on them that they don't need to do this, but they show up for us each and every week. We've done this 220 consecutive weeks, and they're here like all the time. Tony's not here this week, but they cover for each other. And of course, we have 2 out of 3, and we're good to go in these situations. So please support what they've got going as well. Again, consider supporting the show as well. It keeps us going and, allows for us to appreciate them. Kevin, the Big Me Kickoff Podcast, Buckeye Huddle this week.
Yeah, as I said, I guess had a couple people in the chat say that they'd love to see a Friday show, so I will put one into the system when I get done with this show. As for Buckeye Huddle, be sure to stay tuned in for tomorrow. Well, every day, obviously, but certainly tomorrow with the Miles Lockhart announcement. If it goes the way we expect, you'll have the commitment story as well as impact pieces and everything else, and all sorts of great stuff going on with not only Buckeye Huddle and the Big Meat Kickoff podcast, but also check us out on College Football Playbook as well on YouTube as we start to grow that channel out as well.
The analogies obviously work today even better than usual, Kevin, according to the chat. So nice work there.
I know. I don't know. I had a bunch of Coors Lights yesterday, so I'm in a weird mood today. I don't know.
Again, folks, if you want to see this show, but supplemented by a lot of other good writing and so forth, you can catch it on Bucknuts at 247 Sports. Steve, we appreciate you doing that for us for all this time.
Yep.
Folks, enjoy the summer, and we've got a Sooners show in a half hour. We've got Michigan live at 5, and we've got a special San Diego State Pac-12 Mountain West situation show coming up live at 3 Eastern on the main channel. And we will see you back here next week.